Remakes are a good thing, or at least they should be, but like with most things, it's not quite that simple. Some truly great remakes are being prevented from happening for a few key reasons, and that's a real shame because remakes have one simple goal that might not get accomplished because of this. So let's start by looking at that first part. Alright, before we get started, I want to issue a quick disclaimer. When I say remake, I'm using it as a bit of an umbrella term, since if I were to say remake / port / remaster / re-release every single time, this video would be about twice as long with absolutely no extra content. So if at some point I say remake and show something like this, please don't be upset. Just, I don't know, drink some tea or something. You'll be alright. The Mega Man Zero series is home to some of my favorite games of all time, primarily because of the exceptional movement and combat in these games. However, it's unlikely that that would have been the case if the Legacy Collection didn't exist. See, this collection adds plenty of things like art books, new screen filters, and difficulty options, but it's that last one that I think is the most important. See, I actually tried to get into Mega Man X when I was a kid, and it didn't go well. If you didn't already know, these games are pretty hard, but that's part of what makes them so much fun. The challenge of fighting a boss over and over again and truly mastering the fight brings with it a feeling of satisfaction that's nearly impossible to find elsewhere. But like most older games, Mega Man has a life system, and once you run out, you're bounced back to the start of the stage. This basically ruined the games for me, as after too many attempts, I wasn't allowed to fight the boss anymore. However, with the new assist mode in the Legacy Collection, this is no longer a problem. You're not only granted checkpoints, but lives are removed entirely. And the great part about this is that it's all optional. So if you want to play the game the way it was originally designed, you can do that. But if you don't have as much time on your hands, or you're simply not as dedicated and patient, you can play on assist mode and continue bashing your head against the wall uninterrupted. Another example of this can be found in Xenoblade Definitive Edition. You know how in a lot of older games you had to choose between armor that looked cool and armor that prevented you from disintegrating when a boss looked at you? There are still plenty of games that do this, and it's not an inherently bad idea by any means, but it's always nice to have a choice. And in Xenoblade, they added that choice by allowing you to have aesthetic armor on top of your armor for your stats. I could continue listing off small additions to remakes all day. I'm sure you've got your favorites too, but what I'm getting at here is that remakes are, if done right, pure upgrades from their original versions. Outside of nostalgia, there's no real reason to go back and play something like Xenoblade on the Wii, since the Switch version is such a direct upgrade. But did you catch that last part? No, not the part where I asked you to subscribe, that hasn't happened yet. I'm talking about Xenoblade on the Wii. This is the most important part of remakes. Even if something like Disgaea 4 was the exact same game, there would still be a huge benefit in the fact that now you can play this game on modern consoles like the PS5 and Switch. While ideally we'd get some sort of upgrade, the whole purpose of remakes is to take something on older, potentially antiquated hardware, polish it up a bit, and bring it to modern consoles. And this is why I say remakes are great, but there's still that second part. The reason remakes are so special is actually the exact same reason they can totally fall apart. Okay, last disclaimer, I have very little footage of bad remakes because I don't really own that many. The B-roll here is mostly going to be remakes that I like, but just pretend that they're bad. Alright, back to the video. There are obvious exceptions, but the overwhelming majority of the time, remakes are games that were already popular and beloved by their fans. And this is where the problems can occur. Let me use an analogy to explain why this can be such a problem. And to be clear, I'm not referencing one specific game here. So let's say there's a group of people who love a very specific type of cake. They grew up eating this cake and it's shaped not just their culinary lives, but even parts of their personality. This cake is very special to these people. Now imagine you're one of those people and your local bakery announces that they'll be making that cake and you can buy it right now. If your local bakery knew how much this cake meant to you, they could probably sell it to you just by announcing that it exists, right? I think you get what I'm saying. If certain people are diehard fans of a game, a lot of them will buy the remake of that game without much thought, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I've even done it myself. The real problem occurs when these remakes become less about preserving art and more about exploiting nostalgia. This can be especially sad, as when it happens, it leaves us with the original game on outdated hardware, or a remake that may not even be as good as the game it was based on. The quality may end up suffering because the developers know the game doesn't need the same magic as the original, it just needs the same title. Remakes can be great. In fact, they should be great, because the true goal of a remake is simple: Introduce these games to a totally new audience of people who may have never known about them, and give a more accessible way to play for the people who could never forget them. And speaking of games you could never forget, I'll be thinking about this game for a long time, since it'll probably be the best hidden gem this year. So check out this video on that. Oh, and subscribe, since I guess I did promise I'd say that earlier.